Hello there everyone, I just want to do this quick little video to talk a little bit more about the multiplayer, especially since Chapter Master Valrak's interview with Tindalos took place just a couple days ago, and this one at least has a little more detail what to expect on the multiplayer end. I will talk about the single player a little bit as well, but I feel like it would be appropriate if I send you over to take a look at Chapter Master Valrak's video regarding that, because there's a lot more time that's invested on how the single player is going to play out there, but I am going to give a little bit of a brief summary there, especially on like the campaign side, the number of race factions we're going to be playing as, especially early on, because they announced that there's going to be, what, 3 campaigns available on launch. That's what they're aiming for, at least, with the possibility, or at least they're aiming towards 2 more, with hopefully more on their way. They confirmed at least 2 more that they want to do, if nothing else. So we're going to have the Imperial Navy to start off on the listed campaign there. We're also going to have the Necrons and the Tyranids confirmed for the other 2 campaign playthroughs there. And I imagine, I'm going to assume anyway, the Imperial Navy is going to be based around what we understand, what we've kind of seen in the cinematic there. It's going to be more focused around the Gathering Storm and the incident over Acadia there, because that planet, that world, was pivotal to at least starting off the Gathering Storm. I'm not entirely versed on how the series played out, mind you, but I do know it was pivotal to the first part because it was literally called The Fall of Acadia. And while there wasn't much explained about the Necrons and the Tyranids as far as what they're going to have campaign-wise, Tyranids is pretty straightforward, they want to eat everything, but I am interested to see what they plan on doing with Necrons, because I heard a little bit of speculation on the Crone there, because he's supposedly going to be the Necron Catan God, is it what they're called? The Deceiver? At least that's what I heard anyway. I'm not entirely certain if that's true, if that's in like the lore, as it were, but I believe he is related to Necrons, the one who actually sent Abaddon to hunt down the Blackstone fortresses and eventually got them destroyed, so I'm really excited to see the connection on that. Never mind the fact that Admiral Spire is going to be returning for this campaign for the Imperial Navy. Although I did say there were 3 campaigns there, unfortunately that also means that the Mechanicus, Imperial Navy, and Space Marines are all going to be mushed together in the single campaign. So it remains to be seen how it's going to play out, if they're going to have like different personalities that are going to kind of encourage you to do different things as the campaign unfolds. But unfortunately the campaign itself is going to be centered around the Imperium as the whole there, and rather than the sub-factions. But if they're planning on putting more campaigns in over time, then there is still possibility to see that down the road. They're just not going to be able to do it for every single faction right away. They're just going to be they're going to be a factor, at least, for the campaign, your adversaries, and with like at least 8 factions for the Imperial Navy to fight against, it should promote a lot of diversity for that experience. So I'm still looking forward to it, even though they said it's going to be a lot lighter in terms of a grand strategy there. There's going to be elements of it without a doubt, but I am still excited to play the single player regardless, without a doubt, but it still remains to be seen how much is going to be sacrificed in terms of like the single campaigns there, because they also admit that it's going to be a little bit shorter, so we may not get as much build-up, but if nothing else, it does cut down a lot of the busy work, if nothing else, I suppose, because a lot of the original campaign was you play a handful of battles every turn there before continuing on with the story. So that's where the busy work came in. You did 1 mission under the main story. Sometimes I think you did 2 in the same turn, and then the rest was just kind of keep the Orcs and Eldar and Chaos fleets back on some of the worlds that were crucial to you. But let's talk about the multiplayer now. Valrak already mentioned a couple of things they were doing there. I was a little bit confused and uncertain how it was going to be implemented, but we do got more confirmation on that at least. So for the multiplayer, it seems like you're going to be able to build your fleet up completely there. It's not going to be a leveling system as before with the persistent mode. You're going to have access to the entire fleet roster, it sounds like. You're going to have even an option to have like a pre-built fleet to get into the action right away. And they say it's going to be a balanced fleet, and by that they probably mean it's going to be at least a versatile fleet. It's going to be equipped for pretty much any possibility, at least as best they can. And with the experience they probably had with Battlefleet 1, especially with us playing the multiplayer, they can at least make some good assumptions there on what would be a balanced, well-equipped fleet, if nothing else. They've also stated for your Admiral ship there, for the battles themselves, is going to have the option to be equipped with 2 skill abilities, kind of like the skill abilities we already currently have in Armada 1, but it's going to be the only ship that's actually going to be able to use these skill slots there. Everything else is not going to have access to them, which is going to be a drastic change to how the multiplayer currently plays, because you had multiple means to spot ships outside of range with pretty much everything with recon beacons if you so wished. Everything had shield transfers, everything had micro warp jumps. So without a doubt, your Admiral ship's actually going to be useful, and it's actually going to be more potent than everything else just with that alone. Which I'm kind of excited about, because the Admiral ship didn't really yield any benefits for you aside for being the target of most objectives there, or at least the data recovery and the assassination. As for the upgrades themselves, they said that you can choose 2 upgrades, and that will be applied throughout your entire fleet there. So we're also going to be limited quite significantly on our power potential for each individual ships, but I believe the customization portion, here's hoping, is going to be related to the number of ships we have to utilize in field. Because with, I'm assuming Tau is going to get all the Tau merchant ship fleets integrated with the Custodian and Protector. I want to assume anyway, because in practice it seems really weird to have 2 different versions of the Tau Empire fleet, so why not just merge them together, plus whatever new stuff they plan on giving to the Tau fleet. And I also feel it might be the same case for Eldar, to an extent. I would feel like anyway, because in truth, with me reading the Battlefleet Gothic rules so far, they only got like 2 or 3 different types of ships with the Craft World, the Eldar Craft World there, but they do have the options to using the Corsairs to kind of complement their fleet some still. So I feel like once the release happens, they're probably going to put those fleets together to kind of give you that diversity without being punished as far as not having access to the more unique and specific quirks that like the Corsairs would have over the Craft Worlds, and there are differences, mind you. The only thing I'm a little uncertain of is, do you actually pick the skills in the pre-game lobby screen there when you're selecting your ships? Because apparently your skills are selected for your Admiral ship only, so you have to pick those skill slots sometime during the pre-screen, the pre-mission, or the pre-battle screen, I want to assume, unless you pick 2 generic skills from your usual fleet management screen, and then it's just automatically applied to the Admiral ship. I'm not entirely certain how that works just yet. It does beg a few questions on if the UI, the overlay, has been changed completely, because like I said before, the engine was completely redone, so this may be one of those changes. But another change that they have announced that I'm kind of like a little bit, because this helps with the random element, getting rid of a portion of the random element if nothing else, is that the morale system is now going to, I'm assuming, going to be a progressive bar that drops down depending on how a battle plays out. So to put it simply, it may play out exactly like the Dawn of War morale system there, where as you took damage, depending on what is going on in the battle there, your units, your ships will lose morale there, and once that bar is completely gone, then they will insubordinate, as we already know them to. But of course you can cause a mutiny and restore some morale with some penalties, and that moves into the next change there. But I like this change a lot because it removes, again, the random element. Mind you, insubordination was not a make or break it. It's not like that drastic with the means to cancel the insubordination at will, but it still sucks to have that randomly happen at the beginning of a match whenever a frigate's destroyed, because you are likely to suffer a critical hit of some kind, and if that destroys your weapon or your belt armor, then you're stuck on the back foot really quickly. But when you do cause a mutiny there, to kind of get order back to your ship, you're also going to lose a portion of your crew from what they announced there. And I don't know if this is going to apply as a mechanic you can use for all factions, since they were talking specifically about the Tyranids at this time. So I would recommend listening to the developer audio yourself to kind of be certain, or at least hear it yourself, because I feel like this is more strongly towards the Tyranids. But you can lose your crew to the point where if you kill everyone, then the ships are going to be derelict hulks just floating in space there. It's going to provide an alternate means to possibly kill your opponent's ships, or at least make them inoperable as a means to get victory. And I feel like it's related to the Tyranids, because that's, again, they were talking about the Tyranids at the time, because instead of doing critical hits, the Tyranids focus on killing the crew, because they're so vicious in the boarding actions there that they decide to change the mechanics of boarding completely, at least for the Tyranids. Whether this applies completely to the other factions, I'm not sure. And it has me a little concerned if they do change it. about the effectiveness of Space Marines, because in theory, at least fluff and lore-wise, the Space Marines were all about the surgical tactical strikes there, hitting priority targets and crippling them, not so much mass murder, mass slaughter of the entire ship, even though they probably could have the means to do it. But it just doesn't seem to fit with the Space Marines' way of doing things, I would argue. At least at first glance, so I'm wondering how that's going to play out for them to an extent. We will, though, be able to board our own ships there that have been killed of all their crew, and we'll be able to bring it back to life. That's a cool mechanic I'm actually interested to see how it's implemented, because you will have to manage your crew among your entire fleet there, and if your ship gets progressively weaker, the more crew you sacrifice, either in boarding or getting bored or just bringing your other ships back up, then that could have a nice dynamic for the long drawn out battles. But for more of these drastic changes there, they've also confirmed that emergency repairs will no longer regenerate health, outside perhaps the Necrons. So this is going to be a big dynamic change. It's going to make fast mobile hit and run type of styles there not as practical, because you can conveniently disengage and just wait for your repairs to come back up, especially in the case of Eldar, which rely very heavily on focusing down a single target and then just maybe evading, at least backing off and keeping a distance until they get a window to strike again. So for everyone just playing more on the defensive there, any damage you do to a target is basically going to stick from here on out. So this changes the dynamic to be more effective at your engagements rather than speed and mobility, if nothing else. The emergency repairs will still get rid of temporary critical hits and fire results, mind you, so it's not completely useless there. It just remains to be seen if it's going to still be on the 3-minute cooldown, but as I said, Necrons are going to be the only ones that can repair their ships. Now, how this next news is going to play is going to be interesting. They confirmed that there's only going to be one game mode for the multiplayer now, and that's going to be Cruiser Clash. They said it was completely reworked there. It remains to be seen how it's going to play out, but with the other changes, as I said early on about the multiplayer, with your fleet being pre-assembled and even having the option of a pre-made fleet if you don't know what to take there, this alleviates a lot of my concern, at least for the newer player experience, where you don't have to worry about leveling up your ships anymore. It does remove a dynamic I was personally fond of, mind you, but it should make the newer players have a much easier time for multiplayer. It's just a matter of the matchmaking itself, getting a balanced roster as far as fighting an adversary the same skill level as you. That's going to be the important factor now, and I addressed most of that in my other video. Whereas if they can consistently put effort, make changes and tweaks to the multiplayer, then that at least will help restore some confidence, especially with Armada 1 kind of being neglected. That's going to put a black mark on their record, I feel like, for anyone who truly is interested in the multiplayer. It's going to make them hesitant, if nothing else, to really commit. So Tindalos is going to need to work on restoring that faith a little bit, I feel like. And if they can somehow make the Cruiser Clash interesting there with 12 different factions, then that should be very possible there. Even with just the different factions, the races alone, that should add an amazing amount of diversity there. It's just a matter of making sure they're balanced in the way that not everyone's playing as Necrons, for crying out loud. That will easily kind of collapse that theory there if they mess up on the balance there. And of course, that will still take some time even on release. Something's bound to need reworking, if nothing else. But so long as it's relatively good at the start, then we're looking very promising from here on out. I do hope they keep rank mode roughly as it is now there, with the persistent fleet destruction there for a best of 3, because I feel like that adds a nice dynamic there. And I think that is all the main stuff that I managed to catch as far as the multiplayer changes and how that's going to work out. So you are unfortunately not going to be able to bring your super heavy Titanic ships from the campaign to multiplayer, they said, so we're going to be stuck with our traditional ships. Maybe we get something exciting, something new there as far as like different class of ship, mind you, but it's not going to be something that's so drastically different, so drastically powerful. It still remains to be seen if we're going to be sticking to the same kind of like 700 point fleets there, or if they are going to be cranking up the size of the battles for us there too, which if they try and get a little bit too ridiculous on the points there, it could cause problems on balance, because things can die so drastically quickly there with like with heavy lances always hitting their targets there. Novacans possibly just doing a massive amount of damage there in a hurry. And of course, let's not talk about the burst damage we already have with things like the Custodian Heavy Bomber potential. So there is a little bit concerned there if they inflate the points further. But I highly encourage you to go see Chapter Master Valrak's videos there if you haven't already. And I am looking forward to more news on Armada 2. It's still a ways away, mind you, but they have reiterated that it's going to be a 2018 release. There is always possibility of delays, but it still means that it's probably going to be the later half of the year, if nothing else, until we get something more concrete. So thank you everyone for listening.